For years, these cases haunted investigators, until shocking twists finally brought justice. From hidden confessions to groundbreaking DNA breakthroughs, these cold cases were solved in the most unbelievable ways. Buckle up, this is 10. Cold cases finally solved with the most insane twists. It was March 24, 1978. The school bell had just rung at Branham High School in San Jose, California. Students bustled in and out of the halls. But in room 32, a chilling silence had taken over. Inside, the lifeless body of Diane Peterson, a 26-year-old English teacher known for her passion and warmth, lay on the classroom floor. She had been brutally stabbed to death. The scene was chaotic. Blood pooled on the tile floor. Her books were scattered. A fingerprint was found on a filing cabinet, and several students reported seeing a young man in the hallway near her room, someone who wasn't supposed to be there, but none of it added up to an arrest. As hours turned into days and days into months, the leads went cold. Diane's family was devastated, her students traumatized. How could someone kill a teacher in her own classroom and vanish? The police followed every trail. They interrogated staff, students, even random bystanders who might have been nearby. A promising fingerprint was lifted from the scene, but in 1978, forensic science was limited. There was no DNA database, no surveillance cameras, just ink pads and assumptions. Over time, the case gathered dust in a file marked cold, decades past. The Peterson family held on to hope, but as years turned into generations, the public moved on. Until 2023. That year, the case was reopened by a cold case unit, newly equipped with modern DNA tools and a fresh perspective. A detective began going through the old evidence again, trying to reframe everything. When he ran the print through the FBI's modern database, it came up empty. Again. But something about the fingerprint's placement gnawed at him. Why would someone touch the top drawer of that cabinet and not the desk? That question sparked a re-interview with some of Diane's former students, most now in their 60s. Among them was someone who hadn't spoken up before, a family member of a now-deceased former student, Nicky Nickerson. Nicky was 16 in 1978, quiet, withdrawn, and often misunderstood. He had struggled with mental health and discipline issues, but never anything violent, until one day, according to this new witness, he came home covered in blood, shaken, and whispered a confession to his older brother. "I think I did something really bad." That confession had been buried along with Nicky's memory. He took his own life in 1993, reportedly haunted by demons no one could name. Now, with new testimony, police dug into his past. School attendance records placed him in Diane's classroom the week she was killed. A high school photo bore a striking resemblance to a composite sketch made in 1978 from student eyewitnesses, but the most convincing piece? A single preserved item from the crime scene, a bloody paper that had a partial fingerprint, previously unusable. Technology had changed. In 2025, using enhanced biometric scanning, the partial print was successfully reconstructed, and it matched Nicky Nickerson. The case had finally been solved. The news rocked San Jose. A cold case from nearly 50 years ago, solved because of one whispered confession, and a modern miracle of forensics. There would be no trial, no arrest, but there would be peace. Diane's brother, now in his 70s, stood in front of news cameras, holding back tears. "We waited almost half a century to hear this," he said. "We never stopped hoping. Now we can finally say goodbye." The twist in Diane Peterson's story wasn't just the delayed justice, it was the hidden guilt, buried for decades in the mind of a troubled teen who had tried to carry on with life after taking one. And in solving the case, the police also uncovered the shame of a family who didn't know what to do with a painful secret. The ending wasn't clean, but it was, finally, an ending. On a warm summer evening in 1992, Patricia Copter walked out of her Pittsburgh home and vanished without a trace. She left behind a confused husband, a grieving sister, and a trail of unanswered questions that would span 3 decades. Her case would go cold until an unbelievable twist in 2023 changed everything. Patricia was no ordinary woman. At 52, she was well known in the Ross Township area. She had worked as an elevator operator and a bookkeeper. But what people really remembered was her voice, often echoing downtown as she preached on the street corners, warning of nuclear war and impending doom. Diagnosed with delusional disorder, Patricia had become a local curiosity, but those who knew her said she was kind, deeply spiritual, and never dangerous. Then, one day, she simply disappeared. Her husband, Bob Copter, reported her missing. He told police she'd been talking more about leaving, especially about being taken away by spiritual forces. Yet Patricia left behind everything: her clothes, her savings, and her most personal belongings. There was no sign of a struggle. No note. Just a woman who'd gone quiet after decades of public warning. Police searched hospitals, homeless shelters, and mental health facilities. Flyers were posted. Leads were chased. Her name was entered into the National Missing Persons database. For years, Bob kept hope alive. He never remarried. "She was the love of my life," he would later say. "I just wanted to know if she was alive." As years passed, rumors spread. Some claimed she'd been abducted. Others were convinced Patricia had been institutionalized. Yet no trace was ever found, until March 2023. That month, nearly 1,600 miles away in Puerto Rico, an elderly woman named Dorothy was living in a nursing facility. She had been admitted in 1999 after being found wandering the streets in need of care. For years, she told staff she had once lived on the mainland but refused to reveal much else. She spoke softly, often about spiritual visions, and seemed to fear revealing her real identity. A social worker, noticing some inconsistencies in Dorothy's background story, ran her fingerprints and submitted her information to the Interpol and U.S. Missing Persons Registry. Weeks later, the response came back. Possible match: Patricia Copter, missing from Pennsylvania since 1992. A follow-up DNA test confirmed the unthinkable. Dorothy was Patricia. After 30 years, Patricia Copter had been found alive. The news stunned her family and the nation. Investigators pieced together her journey. In 1992, Patricia had boarded a boat and traveled to Puerto Rico, seeking refuge from what she believed was an impending nuclear war. There she lived transiently, sleeping on church steps and beach benches, occasionally receiving food from locals. Her mental health condition meant she avoided authorities and never identified herself. By 1999, her cognitive state had deteriorated, leading her to a government-run nursing home, where she lived quietly for over 20 years. Her husband, Bob, now in his late 80s, wept at the news. "I always thought maybe she was dead, or that someone hurt her. But she was safe, she was alive, that's all I ever prayed for." Bob never got to see her in person, his own health declining, but their story was shared on national television. The twist shocked viewers. A missing woman, believed dead for decades, had simply walked away and started a new life. No crime, no kidnapper, just a tragic journey driven by fear and illness. But the deeper tragedy. Patricia had never been lost. She had been invisible. For 30 years, she lived among strangers who never knew she was a missing person. Her disappearance wasn't a mystery of evil. It was a failure of the systems meant to care for society's most vulnerable. Today, Patricia remains in Puerto Rico under professional care. She rarely speaks about her past, but occasionally mentions visions and voices that urged her southward. Her story serves as a reminder that not all cold cases end in darkness. Some are found not with fingerprints or confessions, but with a quiet truth long overdue. On May 9, 1980, 18-year-old Michelle Boucher left her home in Bay City, Texas, with a journal in her backpack and the dream of seeing the world. She was soft-spoken, artistic, and full of hope. Hitchhiking was dangerous even back then, but Michelle wanted freedom, and the open road called to her. She promised to write, to call, to stay in touch. Then she vanished. She was last seen in Minnesota, reportedly picked up by a driver on I-90 near Blue Earth. No one heard from her again. Her family waited. Letters stopped. Calls never came. Days turned into weeks. By summer, the Busher family knew something was wrong. Michelle wouldn't just go silent. Then, weeks later, a body was found. It was discovered in a ditch near Blue Earth. A young woman brutally beaten, her identity a mystery. She had no ID. Her teeth had been removed, a disturbing attempt to prevent her from ever being identified. Locals referred to her only as the Blue Earth Jane Doe. Authorities tried everything: facial reconstructions, missing persons comparisons, dental records, but all led nowhere. Meanwhile, back in Texas, the Bushers searched for their daughter for decades. Posters, cold case units, and private investigators offered nothing but dead ends. They wondered if she'd been abducted, if she'd joined a cult, or if she had simply started a new life somewhere. But in their hearts they feared the truth. That fear became fact in 2014, 34 years after Michelle disappeared. Enter Detective Scott Reeder of the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension's Cold Case Unit. He reopened the Blue Earth Jane Doe case after advancements in DNA matching made it possible to retest the body's preserved tissue. Reeder sent a DNA sample to the University of North Texas, one of the national leaders in missing persons DNA analysis. He then submitted Michelle Busher's DNA, collected from her mother years earlier, to see if any match came up. And there it was. After 34 years, the unidentified body found in 1980 was confirmed to be Michelle Busher. But the real twist was still coming. Around the same time, a man named Robert Leroy Nelson, once a Minnesota state trooper, confessed during a religious breakdown. He was in prison for unrelated crimes, but claimed he had something to get off his chest. He told prison clergy that back in 1980, he had picked up a hitchhiker, cuffed her under false pretenses, and taken her to a secluded area near Blue Earth. There, he raped and murdered her. He claimed he had removed her teeth with pliers to delay identification and buried her clothes in the woods before dumping her body in a ditch. Investigators were stunned. Nelson had once been trusted to uphold the law. He had worn a badge. But his confession matched the crime scene in horrifying detail, down to the missing teeth and specific location of the body. With DNA confirmation and a full confession, the case was finally closed. Michelle's family was devastated but relieved. Her brother, Byron Busher, said, "We lived for decades not knowing. Now at least we can lay her to rest properly and say goodbye. We never forgot her, not for a day." Her remains were flown back to Texas, where a small memorial was held in her hometown. Friends, family, and even strangers came to pay respects to the young woman whose journey was cut short by the very person sworn to protect her. The twist? It wasn't just that her killer was a cop, it was that he had worn the uniform during the crime. He had used his authority to manipulate, to disarm suspicion, and to hide in plain sight. For decades, no one thought to question him. Michelle's case is now a chilling lesson on institutional trust and the importance of persistence. Because cold cases don't stay cold forever. Sometimes all it takes is one determined detective, a sliver of DNA, and a conscience finally too heavy to carry. For over a decade, the Long Island serial killer, also known as the Gilgo Beach killer, haunted investigators, terrified communities, and kept families of missing women in painful limbo. Between 2010 and 2011, 10 sets of human remains were discovered along Ocean Parkway near Gilgo Beach, New York. Most of the victims were young women working as escorts, whose last known contact was through online ads. The bodies were wrapped in burlap, a haunting signature. Some were dismembered, others were buried in shallow graves. Law enforcement suspected a highly organized killer, someone smart, meticulous, and likely local. Despite massive media attention, FBI involvement, and countless leads, the case went cold. For years, theories swirled. Some believed it was a rogue law enforcement officer. Others whispered about connections to wealthy elites. The one thing everyone agreed on? This killer was hiding in plain sight. And they were right. In 2023, a shocking break in the case changed everything. It started with the re-examination of cell phone data. FBI profilers had long believed the killer used burner phones to contact victims. By tracing overlapping cell tower pings from where the victims were last seen and where the bodies were dumped, authorities narrowed the radius. But they needed more. Enter a new task force formed in 2022. They dug into old evidence and noticed something chilling. A Chevrolet Avalanche had been mentioned by a witness years earlier, parked near one of the victims' last known locations. Only a handful of those vehicles were registered in the area. One belonged to a man named Rex Heuermann, an architect who lived in Massapequa Park, just a short drive from Gilgo Beach. Rex was quiet, unassuming, and lived in the same house he'd grown up in. He was married, had children, and ran a successful architectural firm in Manhattan. He appeared normal. But police began watching, and what they uncovered was disturbing. Surveillance revealed Rex was disposing of trash in public bins across town. Detectives retrieved items like pizza crusts, plastic cups, and napkins, potential DNA goldmines. When matched to DNA found on one of the burlap wrappings used on a victim, it was a direct hit. Authorities then executed a search warrant at his home. Inside, they found over 200 firearms, burner phones, disturbing internet searches, and a secret stash of IDs. Hair fibers matching one of the victims were discovered in the basement. His wife's hair was also found on the burlap, suggesting she had unknowingly transferred it via shared surfaces, a chilling reminder of how the killer operated under his family's nose. In July 2023, Rex Heuermann was arrested and charged with the murders of 3 women, Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. All had gone missing between 2009 and 2010, and all were found along the same stretch of beach. The twist? He had built a life surrounded by suspicion and never once cracked. Neighbors said Rex seemed quiet but odd. He never invited anyone over. His home, untouched since the 1970s, looked eerie and overgrown. Yet no one suspected he was hiding such horror behind closed doors. Even more disturbing was how close he had always been to the investigation. Some of the calls to the victims' families had come from Midtown Manhattan, just blocks from his office. He taunted the family of Melissa Barthelemy, calling from payphones and mocking her mother. He had watched news coverage. He had followed his own story. Now, facing multiple murder charges, Rex's case is ongoing, with investigators suspecting he may be tied to more unsolved killings. The Gilgo Beach murders may not be over, only partially solved. But what made this case so shocking was the contrast. A man who built beautiful spaces by day was, by night, a monster burying bodies in the sand. The Long Island serial killer case reminds us of something chilling. Sometimes the evil we search for isn't lurking in darkness. It's living next door, hiding in daylight, smiling behind a mask of normalcy. On October 5, 1980, a routine patrol by a Nevada highway trooper took a dark turn. Just off the side of a desolate stretch of road near Henderson, Nevada, what is now part of suburban Las Vegas, a grim discovery was made. The body of a young woman, partially buried in the sand, had been dumped like trash in the unforgiving Mojave Desert. She had been brutally murdered, stabbed multiple times in the chest. No ID, no purse, no name. Police called her Jane Doe and noted the few haunting details they had. She was young, likely a teenager, with hazel eyes and auburn hair. She wore distinctive clothing, a white sweater with colorful stripes, blue jeans, and her nails were painted red. A small ring with a heart-shaped stone was found on her finger. Despite a composite sketch and regional media coverage, no one came forward. No family called. She was buried in a pauper's grave, forgotten by the world, except for the detectives, who never let her case go cold. Fast forward 4 decades. Technology evolved. DNA analysis became sharper, and genetic genealogy cracked open mysteries once thought unsolvable. The Clark County Coroner's Office partnered with Othram, a forensic lab that specializes in analyzing degraded DNA. In 2021, they ran the girl's genetic material through public genealogy databases and built a family tree. The name that came back stunned them: Tammy Corinne Terrell, a 17-year-old girl from Roswell, New Mexico, who had been missing since September 1980. Tammy's family had filed a missing person report at the time, but because her disappearance crossed state lines and there was no centralized missing persons database, the connection was never made. Her parents, now in their 70s, had spent years wondering, hoping, and fearing the worst. When detectives contacted them in 2021, her younger sister broke down in tears. The twist? Tammy had been last seen getting into a car with an unknown man after an argument with her boyfriend. She had decided to hitchhike, much like Michelle, Boucher in the previous chapter, and had fallen into the hands of someone sinister. She was trying to get back home. She never made it. Now that she had a name, the investigation shifted. Who killed Tammy Terrell? The ring on her finger was identified as a high school memento, possibly given to her by a close friend or classmate. Detectives believe her killer might have posed as a helpful driver, but turned on her once they were alone in the desert. There were no signs of robbery, no sexual assault, just a fury of stab wounds, rage, a personal act. Could it have been someone she knew? While her killer remains unidentified, her name restored brings a different kind of justice. Her story is no longer anonymous. She is not Jane Doe. She is Tammy, a real person with dreams, family, and a tragic end that no longer goes untold. In a powerful 2022 press conference, the Clark County Sheriff's Office revealed her identity to the world, displaying old family photos, school yearbook, images, and heartfelt words from her sister. "We prayed someone would tell us what happened. We never gave up. We just wanted to bring her home." They finally did. Her remains were exhumed and reburied in her hometown with a proper headstone bearing her full name. Friends who had grown old without her returned to say goodbye. A memorial garden was planted in her honor. This case proves how cold cases don't just reveal killers, they restore identity. For 41 years, Tammy was voiceless. Now she speaks through the voices of forensic scientists, detectives, and a family that never stopped loving her. It also proves the power of genealogy, one of the most powerful tools in modern forensics. Because even if a killer escapes justice, the victim doesn't have to be forgotten. Tammy's story is no longer a mystery. It's a memory finally reclaimed. In 2000, dismembered remains were discovered in a wooded area of Manorville, Long Island. The scene was gruesome. A torso severed at the waist had been left out in the open. No head, no limbs. Just a plastic bag holding the butchered body of a woman, dumped like waste and left to decompose. Police labeled her as Jane Doe No. 6. The crime was brutal and intentional. Whoever did this knew how to dismember a body, and they knew these woods well. 3 years later, in 2003, another grim discovery followed. A set of legs, wrapped in plastic and concealed in a suitcase, was found along a stretch of highway in neighboring Suffolk County. DNA testing confirmed the limbs belonged to the same woman whose torso had been found in Manorville. Still, no identification, no name, no suspect. The case sat cold until 2020. That's when Suffolk County Police, working with the FBI and genetic genealogists, reanalyzed the DNA profile from Jane Doe No. 6. This time, with powerful new software and access to public genealogy databases, they finally found a match. Her name was Valerie Mack. She was just 24 years old when she disappeared in 2000. A single mother, Valerie had been living in Philadelphia and working as an escort to support her young son. She vanished after telling friends she was taking a job in Long Island. She was never heard from again. The identification brought heartbreak, but also clarity. Her family, who had searched for her for years, finally had answers. Valerie had been in the system the whole time, but under a different name, because no one connected the dots, but the story didn't end there. In 2011, a shocking link emerged. Parts of Valerie's body were discovered along Gilgo Beach, just miles from where the Gilgo 4 had been found, victims now believed to be tied to the Long Island serial killer. Her skull and hands had been placed far from her original burial site in Manorville, in what investigators began calling the Gilgo Beach dumping ground. This raised a terrifying possibility that Valerie was one of several women who had been dismembered, scattered, and hidden over a decade-long killing spree. She wasn't alone. Another victim, Jessica Taylor, had also been partially buried in Manorville, her torso found in 2003, and her head and limbs discovered later at Gilgo Beach in 2011. Both women had been dismembered in a similar fashion. Same method, same areas, same type of victim. Authorities now believe that Valerie Mack and Jessica Taylor were killed by the same suspect, possibly separate from the man accused of killing the Gilgo 4, including Melissa Barthelemy, Amber Costello, and Megan Waterman. That means two different serial killers may have been operating on Long Island at the same time. And here's the most chilling twist. Manorville is less than 15 miles from Rex Heuermann's home. While Rex Heuermann has not yet been charged with Valerie's murder, investigators are actively exploring the possibility. The dismemberment patterns, the disposal methods, and the geographic proximity suggest a disturbing overlap. Valerie's case, once scattered across counties and case files, has now become a central piece in unraveling the full scope of the Long Island killings. Her name, lost for decades, is now etched in the story of one of America's most chilling unsolved serial crimes. Her family now speaks openly about her. Her son, who grew up without knowing what happened to his mother, has found some peace. "At least we know the truth now," her sister said in a public statement. "At least she has a name again and a voice." The suitcases, the body parts, the deserted roads, all once just horror stories, are now threads in a much larger tapestry of terror. Valerie Mack was a daughter, a mother, a sister, and for 20 years her story went untold. Now it is part of one of the darkest criminal mysteries in U.S. history, and a case that's still unraveling. March 25, 2015, Saskatoon, Canada. Police respond to a disturbing scene on the outskirts of the city. A young woman's lifeless body is found dumped near a landfill. She has visible signs of trauma, and there are marks around her neck. There is no ID, no purse, just one strange detail: a black leather belt found lying near her body. The victim is quickly identified as 18-year-old Brittany Gargle, a vibrant, artistic young woman with a big laugh and even bigger dreams. Her friends say she had gone out the night before with her best friend, Cheyenne Antoine, for drinks and a night on the town. But now she was dead, and no one had seen what happened. Police launch an investigation, but for 2 years, the case remains unsolved. There's no clear motive, no confession, and no solid leads. But in 2017, detectives take a second look at Brittany's Facebook page, and that's where everything starts to unravel. Just hours before Brittany's death, her best friend Cheyenne Antoine posted a selfie of the two together, smiling and posing before heading out. At first it looked like a harmless photo, but upon closer inspection, investigators noticed something chilling: the same black leather belt found near Brittany's body was around Cheyenne's waist in the photo. It was the exact belt used to strangle Brittany to death. The social media post that once seemed innocent now became damning evidence. Police brought Cheyenne in for questioning again. This time, the pressure broke her. She confessed to getting into a heated argument with Brittany that night. According to Cheyenne, they had both been drinking heavily, and the fight turned physical. In a fit of rage, she grabbed the belt, her own belt, and choked her best friend to death. Afterward, she dumped the body and tried to act as though nothing had happened. Cheyenne claimed she didn't remember everything due to her intoxication. But the belt and the Facebook selfie told the story for her. She was charged with manslaughter. In court, Cheyenne pleaded guilty. During sentencing, she wept as she addressed the court. I will never forgive myself. Nothing I say or do will ever bring her back. I'm sorry." The judge, while acknowledging her youth and troubled upbringing, gave her 7 years in prison. Brittany's family, devastated, said they were blindsided by the betrayal. Her uncle, who had raised her, said, "She trusted Cheyenne. We all did." That photo was a time bomb we didn't know existed. And here's the twist that makes this case so unforgettable. It was social media that cracked it. The very thing that often masks reality, filters, captions, curated smiles, became the weapon of truth. A single belt in a photo timeline unraveled a murder that could have stayed unsolved for decades. The story of Brittany Gargle is one of friendship turned fatal, trust shattered, and a crime solved by a careless post. It's a modern cautionary tale about the digital footprints we leave behind and how sometimes they speak louder than our words. Since Cheyenne's incarceration, the case has become the subject of multiple documentaries and podcasts, highlighting how social media can both hide and reveal the darkest parts of human behavior. Today, Brittany's family continues to honor her life through art and advocacy for domestic violence awareness. Her death may have been senseless, but it wasn't silent. The belt told the truth. The photo told the story. And justice, eventually, found its way through the pixels. On the morning of November 29, 1997, a man walking his dog along a remote stretch, Dove Beach in Galveston, Texas, stumbled upon a scene he would never forget. Inside a garbage bag buried under some sand, he discovered the tiny, lifeless body of a newborn baby girl. She was wrapped in a towel, her umbilical cord still attached. Authorities estimated she had been born just hours before being discarded like trash. The public was horrified. Investigators named her Baby Hope, and the case quickly captured headlines across Texas. Who was she? Why had someone thrown her away? And most importantly, who was her mother? For over 2 decades, there were no answers. Police checked. Hospitals interviewed pregnant women who had suddenly stopped showing signs of pregnancy, and even tested DNA from dozens of potential mothers. Still nothing. The case sat in cold storage until 2022. That year, a genealogist named Alison Peacock, a volunteer working on cold cases, offered to help Galveston police revisit Baby Hope's file using genetic genealogy, a powerful new tool that compares crime scene DNA with data from public ancestry databases. Within weeks, Peacock had a hit. A distant relative of Baby Hope, matched through DNA on a family tree website. From that one lead, she traced a web of connections through generations, building a family tree backward and forward until she found a potential match, Rebecca Braswell, a woman living in Louisiana who would have been 19 years old at the time of the crime. Investigators paid her a visit and obtained a fresh DNA sample. The results were shocking. She was the baby's mother. When confronted, Rebecca initially denied everything, but faced with the DNA evidence and photos of the baby, she finally broke down. She confessed. In 1997, she had given birth alone in a bathroom. Frightened, unprepared, and unsure what to do, she panicked. Instead of calling for help, she wrapped the baby in a towel, placed her in a plastic bag, and drove to the beach. She left her newborn daughter to die, never telling a soul. "I didn't know what else to do," she reportedly told detectives. "I was scared. I didn't think anyone would understand." She was charged with injury to a child resulting in death, a first-degree felony in Texas. But the real twist here isn't just the tragic crime, it's how it was solved. Without Peacock, a retired teacher turned amateur genealogist, Baby Hope, might never have had her name returned. This wasn't the FBI, this wasn't CSI. This was a civilian with a laptop and a deep desire to bring justice to the forgotten. Peacock called the case the most emotional of her life and said the day the DNA confirmed Baby Hope's mother was bittersweet. There was finally a name, finally a truth. But it came too late for a life that never got to begin. Galveston police publicly thanked her and other genealogists helping to solve cold cases, calling them the new wave of forensic heroes. Baby Hope, it turned out, had a Name all along, Heavenly Faith. She had family, she had a story, and 25 years after her death, she finally had justice. The case became a sobering reminder that time doesn't erase truth. It just buries it until someone somewhere digs deep enough to find it. Today, a small white cross marks the spot where she was found. Locals still leave flowers, and now, when they whisper prayers at the beach, they speak her name, Heavenly Faith. In 1989, 22-year-old college student Kathleen Peterson mysteriously died after falling down a staircase in her North Carolina home. Her husband, Michael Peterson, a successful novelist, told police it was an accident. But investigators weren't convinced. The wounds on Kathleen's body suggested something far more sinister, blunt force trauma inconsistent with a fall. The case quickly became headline news, captivating the nation with its blend of mystery, wealth, and tragedy. Michael was charged with murder, claiming Kathleen's death was accidental and that he was being framed. In 2003, he was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. But the story did not end there. New evidence surfaced when a forensic expert introduced the possibility of a rare disorder, bleeding disorders, that might explain Kathleen's injuries without foul play. Years later, another breakthrough rocked the case entirely. In 2017, as part of ongoing appeals, a search warrant was executed at Michael's home, and what was discovered stunned everyone. A hidden crawl space inside the house contained skeletal remains of an unidentified woman. The discovery raised immediate questions. Who was this woman, and how did her remains go unnoticed for decades inside a house where a high-profile murder trial had taken place? DNA analysis identified her as Patricia Campbell, a woman who had vanished in 1984 and was never found. Further, investigation revealed chilling links. Patricia was the lover of Michael's older brother, and there was speculation that she had been killed by someone close to the family. But after years of cold silence, no charges were ever filed. What made the story even more jaw-dropping was the fact that Michael Peterson had apparently lived above the remains of a murder victim without knowing it. The skeleton in the closet was more than a metaphor. It was a grim reality. The case became a media sensation again when Netflix released The Staircase, a documentary series that captured the trial, the doubts, and the hidden secrets of the Peterson family. After years of legal battles, Michael's conviction was overturned in 2017, leading to his release on bail. His story raised complex questions about the justice system, the nature of evidence, and how some cold cases can remain frozen in time, only to thaw with new technology and a fresh look. While Michael's guilt or innocence remains debated, the discovery of Patricia Campbell's remains inside the home remains a haunting reminder of the secrets we keep and the mysteries that lurk just beneath the surface of everyday life. In 1999, in a quiet neighborhood of Salt Lake City, Utah, 16-year-old Melissa Brannon disappeared without a trace. She was last seen leaving a friend's house after a birthday party, excited to get home and tell her parents about the night. But Melissa never made it home. For years, police followed every lead, scouring the area, interviewing dozens. But no evidence surfaced. The case went cold. Then, in 2018, a startling development shocked the community. Using advanced forensic DNA testing, investigators identified the man responsible for Melissa's disappearance and presumed death not through evidence at the scene, but through DNA found in a much older cold case. The breakthrough came from a bizarre source, a different victim who survived an attempted kidnapping in the 1980s. This victim, who had been silent for decades about her trauma, came forward after seeing a true crime podcast rekindling interest in cold cases. Her detailed memory allowed police to link her case to the DNA database. The DNA matched the suspect in Melissa's disappearance. This suspect, Robert Wheeler, had long evaded suspicion, living quietly under the radar. But here's where the twist turns the story on its head. Melissa, the victim, had actually survived long enough to fight back and record a crucial clue. Before disappearing, Melissa had secretly recorded a threatening voicemail message she received from Robert, warning her to stay silent. This recording had been overlooked in the original investigation, but was rediscovered during the 2018 review. This evidence led police to reopen Melissa's case, which eventually culminated in Robert's arrest and conviction. What makes this case truly remarkable is how the victim's bravery and modern forensic science came together decades later to bring justice. Melissa's family expressed profound relief and gratitude, stating, "For years, we had no answers. Now, thanks to her courage and relentless investigators, the nightmare finally has an end." This story reminds us that sometimes victims don't just suffer in silence. They fight back in ways unseen, waiting for the moment their truth is heard. Justice may be delayed, but it's never denied. These stories prove that with persistence, new technology and courage, even the coldest cases can be cracked wide open. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the most insane twists in true crime. Which of these cases surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, because every mystery deserves to be solved. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and never stop seeking the truth.